and sisters, a few things to reflect on this morning. And one of it is something that should really hit everybody. Obstacles are sure to come, but alas for you, alas for the one who provides them. And what does that mean? That we have to be careful that we don't become a scandal. We have to be careful that we don't become an obstacle to people encountering Christ. And the first thing to think about is that we could become obstacles to our own selves. We can become obstacles to our life in Christ, our relationship with Christ. There are things that we can make that can affect even our prayer life, can affect even our relationship with Christ in many ways. If we take, for example, there are things that we watch, there are things that we could spend a lot of time watching YouTube, and then we forget even to pray, and maybe things from there we pick up that could even affect our meditation, can affect everything that we do. So that is one thing. We could be an obstacle to our own lives. We could be an obstacle to the things that we do and our relationship with Christ. Secondly, we can become an obstacle to other people. For instance, today we celebrate the feast day of Saint Martin, who is a pastor. One of the things that is not about the pastors, and maybe the readings that are used, or the psalms, the antiphons for the morning prayer, would all be pointing towards, through their example, people were able to come closer to Jesus. They say, your light must shine, Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 16. Your light must shine so that people seeing your good works may give glory to the Father. But what happens if our light is not shining? What happens if we don't become good examples to others? Think of parents. If you become a bad example to your children, then you have become an obstacle to their relationship with Jesus. Parents who don't go for Mass are at the same time telling their children, please, you don't need to go for Mass, it's not really important. Because children will pick up what they see their parents do. So it's so important that we are very careful how we live our lives. I always say, you might be the only Bible someone is reading. Therefore, if your life becomes a scandal, then it's going to be an obstacle to many people. And this is what Jesus says, that it is better for a millstone to be put on your neck and you put in a river, in a sea, than for you to put astray any one of these little ones. So, my dear brothers and sisters, it's not just about I have a freedom to live my life the way I want. I heard a lot about that recently in the campaign, the debates of the campaign in the United States of Trump and Harris. Harris saying women have the right to do whatever thing they want to do with their bodies. And I don't think everything, we are free insofar as we don't affect the freedom of other people. If what I do becomes a scandal to others, it's not just me. Whatever thing you do could affect others, positively or negatively. This is why Jesus says that we must be careful that we don't become obstacle to others. But then people can also become obstacles to us. And what do you do with that? This is why Jesus brings in the aspect of forgiveness. That if we become victims of these things like obstacles, if people have placed obstacles on our path, and we realize that has become an obstacle, then we must forgive, not for their sake, but for our own sake. Forgiveness, I always say, is for our good, not for the good of the people we are forgiving. And therefore, it is not just an obligation, but it's for our own good that we forgive. And Jesus says, if somebody comes to you, wrongs you, if your brother wrongs you 7 times and comes 7 times back to you, saying that he's sorry, you should forgive that person, because forgiveness helps us. This is why Jesus says in Mark's Gospel, chapter 11, verse 25, he says, if somebody, before you stand in the presence of God and pray, make sure that you've forgiven others their sins. Because when we don't forgive, then that can actually become another obstacle to us. Forgiveness is something that opens the door to grace, is something that opens the door to blessings. And that is why we must forgive in order to have access to God and for God to have access to us. So forgiveness does not help the person we are forgiving, but it helps us because it takes away the obstacles that we encounter in our lives. And one of the ways in which to get around all these things is what the apostles asked for. They asked for the gift of faith. Jesus, by our own strength, by our own power, we cannot do any of these things. And Jesus told them that if you had the faith little, like a mustard seed, then you can become an obstacle overcomer. If you have your life focused on Jesus at all times, then it doesn't matter the obstacles that you encounter in life, you'll be able to overcome them because you carry with you Jesus. You have your eyes focused on Jesus at all times. My dear brothers and sisters, as we go through life, we become obstacles in the lives of people, and that is why we have the sacraments of confession, that we may be able to be reconciled with God, but also to be reconciled with one another. We become obstacles in people's lives, but also we encounter obstacles, and that is why we need Jesus in our lives to be able to become overcomers of all these things. That we may have the power to discern, to do the right things at all times, so that we become a light to people, we become the lights to the nations, but also to have the strength to be able to overcome the obstacles that are placed on our path by ourselves and by others. Let us therefore ask God for the gift of faith, that we may remain always faithful to Him at all times.